and some of you may not know. So I will do a brief introduction of Reverend Melanie Martin-Dent, who is our PUSHOUT, the Criminalization of Black Girls in School study leader. She's been through the national mm.W study, and tonight we introduce her as our leader. She has been a pastor for 38 years, and she currently serves the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Polson, Montana, on the Flathead Indian Reservation. She serves on the CSKT, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Task Force, participates in the CSKT Climate Change Adaptation Task Force and the Young Child Wellness Council. She's a founding member and past chair of the Ministry Council of Freedom in Christ, prison ministry at Montana State Prison, Deer Lodge, Montana. And she came to know and love Jesus during her college years and is married with 2 adult children, 1 foster child, and 2 grandchildren. We are so blessed to have her with us, and I now will turn it over to our study leader, Reverend Melanie Martin-Dent.
And we're 5 minutes before the 6:30 time frame start, official start time.
Right. Well, what we could do is give her a very warm welcome, and we could do a 1, 2, 3 clap, and everybody take your off mute for a second. That will also allow us to practice doing that. So take it on off mute, and then when I count to 3, we will all clap and welcome Pastor Melanie to our fold. 1, 2, 3, yay! I hope you feel totally welcomed, Melanie.
I feel totally welcomed. Thank you.
Giving you a clap. You know.
Yeah. I have a quick question before, and I'll be quiet.
Sure.
Did I hit the recording button by mistake, or did someone else recording? Because I just want to make sure. I might have gotten excited and hit the record button, and I don't think I'm doing the recording for tonight. Robin Ball, are you recording, or?
I believe Robin is
recording.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had the icon come up in my screen as well, and for a moment I was like couldn't read because it was right in the center of my screen.
I just pressed got it.
You know, we all deal with our technology, and we all give each other a lot of grace to get through all that. So, very good.
Right. Well, I think I neglected to put in that bio that I served as an interim pastor at 2 different Methodist churches, one in Grace Methodist Church in Dillon, which is where I met Kathy Speech Ferguson. And I invited her to come experience the prison ministry at Deer Lodge. And so I think that's kind of how she thought of me to ask me to be a study leader. I also served the Lonsdale Methodist congregation in Sydney for a couple of years, and their time of great transition and adventure, as it were. Now, Belinda, one of the reasons we have those rotating slide decks is if we have a little tiny bit of time like this, we can play them. How about you put one on until 6:30 and stop it at 6:30, and then we'll formally begin. We'll be patient while Belinda figures it out.
I'm ready to start. I have to do one more click.
Okay. Thank you. So that is one of our rotating PowerPoint slide decks. We will use those sometime. All the slide decks are content from the book PUSHOUT. We'll use them sometimes as a little filler piece like that. We'll have some of them in the actual session, and we will place some in the background of our first break. So you'll see some of those as we go. So welcome. I'm so glad to see you all here on this Zoom. It seems like I've been preparing for this course forever. Kathy Speech Ferguson asked me to be a teacher back 10 years ago before COVID in January 2020. And a lot of water has passed under the bridge since then. But I'm glad you're here for this important and challenging study. I want to begin with a few housekeeping type details. Again, the actual class begins every evening at 6:30 p.m. The Zoom will be open at 6 for icebreakers and formal conversation. We will end at 9 o'clock. This is a long time to be on Zoom, but summer evenings are precious and we didn't want to take up any more of them than necessary. So in order to get us through, I have a number of strategies. We'll have 3 different topics or 3 sections of the class each night with breaks between the session. So there'll be 2 breaks. Each will be a 10-minute break. The first break, we will play the rotating PowerPoint with slides and music. So you have, when you come back, if you see it, don't panic. You're not missing anything. It's just more interesting to look at than a blank Zoom box or an empty chair. During the second break, we're going to have a dance break. So Belinda has come up with some lovely music video slides from the musical Glee, and you are free to let loose. You can turn off your camera if you don't want anybody to see it. If you need to go attend to other things, bathroom break, a glass of water, please do that. The main idea is that if we move our bodies, that we're sitting an awful long time staring at a screen, and moving our bodies will help with our attention and our stamina to get through the thing. So even if you don't dance, if you could just wiggle a little or something, get the blood moving, get it going back to your brain, I think that will help us all get through the evening. All right, we will have breakout sessions, but they are optional. You have a choice to go to the group, or you can stay in the main session. Just don't click join the group. You'll stay in the main session, and I will be leading the same activity based that the breakout groups are doing. It's just in the session with me. Or you could use the time to do something on your own, review your materials, take an extra break, whatever you need to do. We're really emphasizing taking care of yourself and doing what works for you in this course. I want you to know that we will have speakers each evening bringing their lived experience as Black women to our class. This is a really important part of our learning. I'm grateful 2 of our speakers are here with us now, and you will get to know them better as we continue in the class. When I started this, it was going to be a class in Montana, and the Montana chapter of the ACLU came out with a study of push out of Indigenous children, just as I agreed to do this class. So many of the same dynamics happen with other people groups than just Black girls, but that's what this class is about. Feel free to take the information, to research it if you need to, on how the same dynamic happens to other groups who might be more prevalent in your community. And finally, we'll open and close each session with worship. So we begin our worship tonight with a theme song for our class, which is Lift Every Voice and Sing, regarded by some as the Black national anthem. Our first rendition is by a group of elementary school children. Belinda will share her screen to get us going. Liwliwa, you're on.
I'm unmute. Okay. Let us have our opening prayer. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, it is indeed you that have brought us thus far. As we gather together to discuss important but difficult challenges such as white privilege and racial inequality, make us mindful of the gift of life in spite of the hate present in the world. Remind us of the goodness of people in spite of the sins that we commit against one another, sins that come from brokenness and our own inability to see you reflected in each other. Forgive us, God, for the ways in which we have been complicit in creating anything other than the beloved community. Make us ever mindful to do the work of justice and be a body of peace in this world, a world ripped apart by conflict, war, famine, violence, guns, racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, ageism, genocide, poverty, and privilege. This is a new day you have given us. May we begin again and recommit ourselves to removing barriers where we find them, on state houses and in prisons, on mountaintops and in classrooms, on continents and in churches. We pray to you on this day and all the days ahead to keep us forever in the path. Amen.
Bishop Karen Oliveto is with us to share in our opening worship today, and I would like to call on her at this time.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It's so good to see you, friends. I'm so glad you're a part of this study. I give thanks to the leaders of the Mountain Sky Conference Mission Team and the Mountain Sky UMW for choosing this study on PUSHOUT, the criminalization of Black girls in schools. It is so critical that we learn from people whose life experience isn't like our own, no matter who we are, to understand the pain, the injustice, the suffering that they experience, and how we can work together to change things. As I was thinking about this study, I came upon a most unusual scripture God put in my heart for this time of year. It's one that's usually read right after Christmas, and I mean right after. We barely say amen on Joy to the World before we encounter a most disturbing historical account of violence. It's the story called The Slaughter of the Innocents. When Herod hears that a baby is born who's called King of the Jews, he's concerned because he's the ruler of Israel. And so you'll remember he sends the wise men to find the baby, who are to come back to him and tell him where he is, so that he didn't tell the wise men that, but he was going to murder the child.
Worship too.
And so the wise men in a dream realize they can't return to Herod. And so when Herod learns that he's been outwitted, he orders the murder of every boy in Bethlehem under the age of 2. It's known as the slaughter of the innocents, and it fulfills the prophecy of Jeremiah. A sound was heard in Ramah, weeping and much lament. Rachel weeping for her children, Rachel refusing all comfort, her children gone, dead and buried. Rachel weeping. There is a steady drumbeat of racism's violence in this country. A war has been declared in the United States and the enemy has been labeled by skin color. A war specifically waged against Black and brown people. I can't get out of my head the sound of Rachel, Rachel who will not be consoled, Rachel who is weeping for her children who are criminalized simply for their skin color or who are gone, dead and buried. There are too many weeping Rachels in the United States right now. How can we comfort Rachel? How can we push back the pandemic of racism, one that was literally written into this country's constitution? I had a chance one time when I was in Little Rock to stop at Central High School, a National Historic Site, where the Little Rock Nine broke down the color barrier and ignited a firestorm simply by going to school. It was at the visitor center that highlights of the Constitution were presented, a reminder that from the very birth of this nation, racial equality was the law of the land. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King pointed this fact out in 1967, and his words are hauntingly true today. He said, when the Constitution was written, it was declared that the Negro was 60% of a white person. Today, another formula seems to declare that he is merely 50% of a person. Of all the good things in life, he has approximately 1/2 of whites. Of the bad, he has twice those of whites. There continues to be a racial divide in this country, and it remains as deadly as it did from the start of this nation's birth. If you don't believe it, if you no longer pay any mind when another young man of color is gunned down, just listen for the cries of Rachel. Her sobbing is all around us. Now, I want to speak to my white sisters, because for many of us who live comfortably and even blindly with the privilege that comes from our white skin, too many of us often stick our head in the sand and pretend we live in a post-racial society. We hear our Black and brown siblings tell of their racist treatment, and we often interrupt and say, oh, it's not really like that anymore. Or, well, let me tell you what happened to me. Thank God there are prophets like Jeremiah who help us remove our blindfolds and unstop our ears. Thank God there are people like United Methodist women who are willing to get out of our comfort zones and struggle with the hard stuff. Because, you know, racism isn't an inconvenient social construct. It's a deadly way to control others. Herod killed the babies of Bethlehem because he was afraid. He was afraid of Jesus' power. So he killed innocent ones to keep himself safe. When we refuse to hear the truth of the lived experiences of others, we become Herod, exercising power over others as a way to keep ourselves safe. And the result? There are a lot of weeping Rachels weeping over the criminalization and deaths of their babies. Rachel is weeping. Rachel is weeping. I give thanks for your willingness to go deep, to learn from one another through our differences and enter into a fuller humanity, dare I say, the body of Christ. We're able to enlarge our hearts beyond our race, our class, our abilities, our gender identity, our sexual orientations, our occupation, our immigration status, our educational level. And when we do that, we are blessed in a way we never thought possible by these differences. Our lives are richer. We learn how to live with a heart and with eyes wide open as we seek to create a world of justice and compassion. A friend of mine from Zimbabwe told me about their traditional greeting in Zimbabwe. And he said it has no real translation in English. It's called Chabadza. And it's always said when you pass someone, it means something like, hello, can I help? Unlike here, right? When we pass one another and we say, hi, how are you? In Zimbabwe, they really mean it. He said to me, When we say Chabadza, what we mean is greetings. Let me stop a while and help you with what you're doing. We will work together and we'll talk a bit, and then I'll be on my way. Chabadza is the sharing of a moment, a participation in the task at hand, and an acknowledgement that life is best when it's shared. Life is best when it's shared. As long as we live in silos that separate us by our differences, we don't get to enjoy the best of life. And in fact, life turns out deadly for those who are feared because of differences. I pray that through this study, you will practice Chabadza with one another, with the speakers and leaders. But then what would it mean for you to practice it in your office, in your community, at the dinner table, as you walk down the street? How would your living change if you took time to look others in the eye and say, let me join you side by side, work with you so I can learn from you and make your walk in the world a little easier. This is what it means to comfort the Rachels who are crying. This is our task as we work for racial equality. This is what we must do to stop the criminalization of Black girls in school, to stop the flow of blood of our young people. This is what's required of us as children of God, as followers of Jesus. Chabadza. Hello. How can I help? I invite you to pray with me. Gracious God, I give thanks for all those who are gathered here today. I ask that you open our hearts, open our minds, that we might hear in new ways. That when we are disturbed, we will recognize it's the stirring of your Holy Spirit, leading us to something truer, something so important, something life-changing, something that will draw us closer to justice and help us create with you your beloved community. Bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing, Bishop Oliveto. That was lovely. All right. Well, back to me now. On my screen, I just have to get it back where I can see. So it is always important that we take good care of ourselves. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And that means we begin by loving ourselves. We will be dealing with a lot of potentially triggering topics during our time together. And so for this course, it is essential to take good care of yourself. If you are overwhelmed by emotion at any point, please do whatever you need to do. Take care of yourself. You may turn your video off, you may do deep breathing, you may leave the meeting, you may come back later or not. Move your body, call a friend. The main sessions are being recorded, as was mentioned earlier, and the link will be sent out by email when the video is ready. So you can go back and watch the session later if you need to leave and you choose to do so. Again, the breakout rooms will not be recorded. We hope they will be a safe place to engage in conversation with others. Now, it's natural to have physical reactions to this material. Please do not jump to conclusions about another's response. We are going to work together to not pry, to not attempt to fix somebody else. We are each responsible for taking care of ourselves and for asking for what we need from one another. Again, if you need to talk to someone after the class, Belinda will put you in touch with a compassionate listener. Brenda, you want to wave for a second?
Hello.
Yep, there's Brenda. I'd also like to remind you of the Sisterhood of Grace Covenant, which you received by email and is used in a lot of UMW events. We're not going to take time to go over it. We are a learning community seeking to be the beloved community, listening with open hearts and minds, speaking with respect. We want this class to be a brave space. These slides were shown at our national training, and I thought they were very much to the point. They will hopefully appear shortly.
Can you see them on the screen?
There they are. Okay. I had to switch my view. Together, we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Okay, we are heading towards our first speaker tonight. I thought I'd begin by just asking how many of you have read the book PUSHOUT. You can raise your hand, you can use Zoom, you can just do this. We're not going to take much time. Again, how many have read part of the book or seen the documentary? We're now going to view the trailer for the documentary of PUSHOUT. And just so you know, the first 20 seconds show scenes of law enforcement officers interacting with students in classrooms in ways that can be disturbing. The soundtrack does not describe what is being shown, so if you need to just close your eyes for this 20 seconds, I encourage you to do so. The scenes are over when the music plays.
This video went viral, but incidents like this can be found throughout America. The criminalization of Black girls in schools disrupts one of the most important factors in their lives: education. I would like for schools to become locations for healing so that they can become locations for learning.
These young women, they are pushing up against racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, xenophobia.
I've asked girls if they felt that teachers were afraid of them. And some girls will say yes, their teachers are afraid of them. And then they laugh, because why would an adult be afraid of a child?
And the word of the week is condone. Condone.
As a nation, talking about the school-to-prison pipeline for Black boys and Latino boys, but absent of that conversation
What we learn, Emma?
was how girls of color and Black girls in particular were being impacted.
What that then did was send the message that what's happening to girls isn't necessarily a crisis.
What's crazy is that there are 300 girls in this school. Good majority of girls here are Black, and they go through a lot. And I know they go through a lot because they're Black. They live in America.
My teacher got super duper mad and dragged me by the chair, yelled at the other kids to move, and dragged me all the way outside.
Oftentimes, I'm going to say what they don't see is they just refuse to see Black girls as being somebody able to be harmed. My harm can actually be like, come at me and I'm coming for you.
I was known for fighting. I had a big mouth. Like, I would just put up a front like I was so angry. But deep down inside, I was really depressed and I was really sad.
We know there's a higher number of assaults against Black girls. They're more likely to be trafficked. They're more likely to be molested. They're more likely to fall into so many different categories that affect their ability to learn.
I actually got caught up with a pimp for like 3 days, but I knew it was like so wrong. Like I just didn't want to be here no more.
You push a girl out of school and you push her into the streets. You push her into violence. You push her into trauma.
Whereas I felt like we needed to approach any of our interventions from they are capable, they are strong, they are vulnerable.
It matters.
They are worth protecting.
Even though you think you're doing racial justice work, if you're not talking about girls, you're not doing racial justice work.
The question is whether we believe that certain children need surveillance and policing and punitive responses, and other kids get to explore who they are.
Black lives matter worldwide till the end of time. We rising up. Can't nobody stop us. The love we got's colossal.
Thank you. I thought it was important to begin with seeing Dr. Monique Morris, seeing some of the girls, and really opening up our conversation with their presence among us, even through video. Now, I am delighted that we have a speaker who is going to be present among us, with herself sharing her own lived experience with us. Reverend Dr. Valerie Jackson is the lead pastor at Cameron United Methodist Church in Denver, Colorado. She is also the Mile High Metro District Congregational Resource Minister. And if I read my email correctly, she served as an adjunct faculty member for the Iliff Theological Seminary in Denver, and she has a lifelong experience of being a Black woman. Thank you oh so much for coming. Please welcome the Reverend Dr. Valerie Jackson.
Thank you so much, Pastor Melanie. It is so good to be here with you tonight. Yes, my soul is tired. I have 60 years now as being a Black woman, and not just a Black woman, but a Black woman who is queer. And so my soul is tired, yet I am so honored to be here with you tonight. I want to start by saying thank you to Melanie Martin-Dent for your determination and your perseverance. You've had a lot of challenges come and go regarding this course, but you did not give up. And I'm grateful to you for reaching out to me last week to be with you on tonight and tomorrow night. And I also want to say thank you to UMW and to Mission U, all who have worked behind the scenes to make this happen. UMW, it is so good to see you continuing to stand in the heritage, in your heritage of doing justice work and actually doing the work. I'm so grateful you encourage my soul that you are willing to do the study and that you're willing to do the work, that you even have the wherewithal to know that a woman of color, a Black woman, should be present with you tonight to have this discussion. So I thank you for that. I also want to greet, I think I saw on her video, Cheryl Ferries, and if I'm saying your last name incorrectly, I apologize, but I want to greet you since we are honoring Black girls and Black women. I see you and I'm so glad you're here. And if there's anyone else here that I don't see, and you are a Black girl and a Black woman, I honor you and am grateful that you're here with me tonight. I want to make a covenant with you. And in that covenant, I bring to you tonight my heart, my lived experience, my story. And I invite and welcome from you authenticity, respect, all questions, and an open heart for teaching moments if and when they are necessary. If you are willing to step into this covenant with me, and if you know where your reactions are in Zoom at the bottom of your screen, would you put a heart in your video, please? Thank you, thank you. I see them coming. Thank you so much. As you're continuing to put the heart on your screen, I want to start by saying, most of us probably know that the Bible says life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I've heard, I'm a cradle Baptist. I was not born into the Methodist Church. I was reborn into the Methodist Church. So I've heard that scripture all of my life. But I have to say, I didn't fully understand the full meaning of it until I went to theological school in Atlanta, Georgia, ITC, the Interdenominational Theological Center. Until I went to theological school, the meaning had been taught to me at church more from a prosperity gospel approach, speaking positivity into your life, that kind of meaning. But when I went to theological school, I learned that there is so much power in language. And I want to start with this. I'm glad that you're taking the time to look at the key terms of the book that you're reading. But for just a moment, I want to take it to a higher level of how important language is in general. And then I'll come back down to our key terms. I remember taking a class at ITC from Dr. Jacqueline Grant. She is a professor of systematic theology. She is a womanist theologian. And she wrote an article called The Power of Language. And it just changed my life. And since that time, which has been quite a while ago, because I was in school at that point from 2000 to 2004, it changed my life. And I want to share with you just a few words of what she says about language. Language forms our consciousness. Language forms thoughts, ideas, and images. As such, it is a powerful tool. Language can be used to build community or to destroy it. It can affirm humanity or deny it. It can include or exclude. It can empower or disempower. It should be obvious, therefore, that the control of language via creation and definition makes for the control of people. It assists the process of keeping certain people in their prescribed places. It orchestrates people's feelings about themselves and about others. Language is powerful. And for our purposes tonight, and as I live into my call for the last few years, since 2000 actually, I have also learned that language does two other things. For us specifically tonight, looking at key terms, if these terms are new to you, then language in this case is opening you up to a world that you were not aware of that exists in our nation. It has existed in front of us, in the midst of us for generations now, but you may not have known. And these words are introducing you to another world, a subculture, if you will, that our nation does not like to talk about. And the second thing that these key terms will do is if you really learn these key terms, embody them, and begin to study them and make them a part of your conversation, you will give Black girls, Black women, people of color, all marginalized people actually, you will give them the comfort and the encouragement of knowing that you are aware of their existence and you are aware of how difficult and complex their existence is. Because I cannot tell you how lonely it is to have conversation on a daily basis with so many people that just in talking to them, I can tell they have no idea of what I go through and what people like me go through. Pastor Melanie, I meant to ask you to time me and I forgot. Can you tell me how far into my time am I at this point?
Well, we got to you a little late and I'm going to work on making up the time later. I want you to, but we're to the point where we're scheduled to be going to breakout groups soon.
Okay. And when we get to that time, let me know. Call me and I won't mind pausing. Okay?
All right.
Okay. Because the next thing I'm going to do is I was asked to choose a couple of the key terms that really resonate with my story. And that's what I'm going to do now. Intersectionality is the first one I chose. I define intersectionality as the convergence of multiple marginalizations or lived experiences. And as I've already said to you, for me, that means I'm a woman, I'm Black, I'm queer, and then if you add in my economic status, that is another level, and there are probably other levels that we can add. So it's almost like saying it's a term that articulates living life with multiple life-threatening conditions. Somewhat like having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes all at the same time. It's very similar to that, but different in that I don't get to choose the life-threatening conditions that I live with. I just live with them. And if I'm lucky, I might figure out a way to thrive with them. The next term is implicit bias. This is a powerful one. Oh my God. I define this one as unconscious and subconscious thoughts and beliefs about persons or people, things and situations that drive our behaviors in adverse and unhealthy ways. Would somebody be willing to just throw out an age? Is somebody willing to share their age real quick?
65. Okay. Medicare card carrying, 65.
65. Okay.
83.
So, implicit bias are thoughts that you have about me that you don't realize you have. And they will cause you to act a way or respond to me in a way that you may think is due to some other reasons, but it's being pushed by some internal stuff that you don't know exists. And that's what makes it so dangerously powerful. Now, for the one who said that they are 65, right? It's not your fault that you have these implicit biases. It is your fault if you learn this tonight and do nothing about it. But to have them, you had nothing to do with it. If you were born into America and you're now 65 years old, that means for 23,725 days, you have been groomed in this American narrative. You have been groomed to live into whiteness. All of us have. I'm a Black woman and have been groomed to live into whiteness. And it's really difficult to just turn that off. It's really difficult. It takes intentional observation of your thoughts and your actions, and it takes intentional retraining yourself. And it is a retraining that you will be doing to the end of your days. You won't graduate. And I can promise you that because I too am retraining myself how to simply be human as opposed to being a Black woman who's queer. That leads me to the next term, and I'll stop on this one, Pastor Melanie. Internalized racial oppression. Internalized racial oppression. I define this as marginalized persons believing what white supremacy and patriarchy and think and say about them, beginning to believe it. When I say that I'm retraining myself, it means I am teaching myself not to believe what white supremacy has said about me and what patriarchy says about me and what heteronormativity says about me. And this has been so hard. A good example would be when I was blessed to be appointed to U Park in 2016. My first week in that position, I remember clearly going into what they call the workroom. It's the room where the copier, the mail, and a lot of other important things are. The first time I was about to go into into that workroom, I stopped myself before entering that space. Because the thought that came to my mind was, if anybody walks in this building, they will not understand why a Black woman is going into this workspace where some critical information and items are. And how will I explain that? They are certainly not going to believe that I am the lead pastor of this church. Now that was my thought. Nobody else was there, so no one else made me think that. It was me and the internalization of what I have been taught about myself for the last however many years that was then. So I had to teach myself from that point on. I had to make a decision to say, Valerie, in this space, you're not just a woman who is Black and queer, you are the lead pastor. And for days after that, I had to start my day walking into that building saying, you're the lead pastor, so that I could stand into my pastoral authority. Internalized racial oppression and internalized patriarchal oppression. I am still reteaching myself the lot from the lies that men have taught me about me, the things that I can't do, the things that I'm not supposed to do. I'm not even supposed to be a pastor, Bishop Karen, coming out of the Baptist church. It is deeply sorrowful and painful when we begin to believe the lies that have been told to us. But it's hard not to when white supremacy and all other supremacies are so insidious and they perpetuate, it gives life to itself and perpetuates through systems and people that we trust, our parents, our grandparents, schools, churches, all the people and institutions we trust are the places where we learn who we are and how to be in this world. I'm going to pause right there because I believe we need to go into breakout sessions. And I think the questions before you are, did you see any words you already knew in these key terms? What terms stood out to you? Did any terms or definitions surprise you? Pastor Melanie?
Yep. I'm typing here at the same time. Give me just a second. All right. So, let's see what we need to do. So yes, we will go into breakout groups to discuss those questions. We will spend about 7 minutes in those groups, and then we'll come back for a little question and answer. And I want to say thank you so much to you, Dr. Jackson. You made those terms come so alive. I wish we had time for you to talk about every single one of them, but we're going to go to our groups and we're going to talk with each other. Again, if you don't want to go to a group, just stay in the main session and we'll talk about the questions here too. All right, well, I saw we got sent, at least I got sent automatically to the breakout group, but some of us came back here and let's just talk about it. So we've heard from Dr. Jackson first, so I'd like to hear from some of the others of you. Again, are there 3 questions? Are there any questions? I'm losing my place here.
I put the questions in the chat.
Right, thank you. So, did you see any words you already knew? Which terms stood out to you? Did any terms or definitions surprise you? We don't have to do them in order. We don't have to do all of them. That's just to get us started. So I would love to hear from the rest of you.
I enjoyed listening to intersectionality. I think it brought a lot of points together that you can see in many situations.
Thank you, Robin.
I'll be honest, I did not understand the intersectionality, even though I read the definition, but Reverend Dr. Jackson, now I get it. My cat. So thank you very much. There's not a Zoom without a cat. But yes, you're explaining it. It's clear to me now. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Belinda. Anyone else?
I'd like the school to prison pipeline. Before this study, I'd never heard that before. I'd like to hear if she would, Dr. Jackson, the school to prison pipeline, what does that mean to you? Or your comments?
Let me see if I can say this quickly, Belinda. For me, it is a term that reiterates how me as a Black girl is seen and perceived in our society, and that our society sees us as there being no hope for us, that the only place for us is to end up in prison. And so we are seen as monsters, really. We are seen as less than intellectual. We're not smart. We're going to end up there anyway. And so let's just fast track you. There are no other options for you.
And I think there's studies that have shown that like the kids who are having discipline issues in the school by the time they're 6 or 7 end up sort of on the track that takes them down towards eventual incarceration as the experiences pile upon experiences and people treat them that way because of what their history is for reading their files. Again, I had heard it in terms of men of color, but one of the things I really like about this study is thinking about what specifically happens to girls and women, because that's the intersectionality piece. We still see, you know, so much of the talk, the news stories are about the men, and the girls are hurting too.
Yes, they are. And I'm glad you said that, Pastor Melanie, because here's something that's really important to know about Black girls and Black women. We are at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will. There's white men, white women, then Black men and Black women. So we are oppressed by all of that is above. We are also oppressed by Black men. If you pay attention to the movements that happen when things happen in our society, we are quick to get out in the streets and have a movement and protest about what happens to Black men. Notice, if you will, going forward, that we are less quick to step into movement for a Black girl or a Black woman. We're the last on the totem pole.
That's very illuminating. It's illuminating for me to hear that. One of the things that I thought, I put it in the chat just now, but when they talk about culturally competent curriculum, I found that very interesting. Wow, I mean, that just kind of opens everything up. I mean, wow, what does that mean to any of you? The way we were taught in school is one thing. The way we were taught about white people and Indians, or, you know, the Indian, different things we learned in grade school, elementary. It's just, but yeah, this is very exciting to me, this culturally competent curriculum. Wow. And I am ignorant. I don't know what pedagogical means. Pedagogical.
Teaching
how you teach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I will speak to being on a reservation community and here our school that has like the preschool, the Head Start, and the young kids. They've become a trauma-informed school. So they assume that the children may need to come down before they focus in their classrooms, so that the mornings they wanted rocking chairs. The mornings are what they call a soft start. They don't go right into instruction. They want the kids to center and let go of whatever else has already happened in their day and be present. And to hear, again, having Indigenous teachers, having Native teachers, having, you know, reference to the things of these tribes in the actual teaching of other subjects. And all of those to me are part of the beginning to develop. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree, Pastor Melanie. And how about having the truth in our books? I don't know how you all were when you began to hear the truth about history, but I was in college. So that's like 19, 20 years old before I began to get a glimpse of historical truth. Did not get it in high school or elementary school.
Right. Yeah, look up Christopher Columbus someday on the internet. Our favorite hero for a human, our favorite holiday for a human trafficker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Sunday in our small group, we talked about the difference it makes about what part of the country we grow up in, what our experiences are. And some people live in a more isolated place, and it's harder for them to be exposed to diversity.
Yeah, that's a good point, Marianne. And if we tie that to the discussion that our group was just having about culturally competent curriculum, at the very least, they would be educated.
Yes.
They could be educated about the diversity of people that is in our nation, even if they are not actually encountering those persons.
True.
Right? Yeah, I'll stop there because I want to hear more from you all.
All right, we have a few minutes for question and answers. If anyone would like to ask Dr. Jackson any questions at this point, we'll just take a couple minutes for this.
Dr. Jackson, would you restate what you were saying about I heard totem, the layers?
Yes. I was sharing in our group that one thing you may or may not know about Black girls and Black women is that we are at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will. So since I'm a woman who's Black and queer, there's first the white man, the white woman, the heteronormative man and the heteronormative woman, then the Black man, and then me. And all of that is listed above me, it has systems of oppression against me, including the Black man. And that is a constant tension between Black girls and Black women and Black men. There's a constant tension that they who know well what oppression is and what oppression feels like would actually then repeat it to Black girls and Black women.
Oh.
Yeah.
We have time for maybe one more question before we go to our break.
This isn't a question, Reverend Jackson. It's a story that I'd like to share because it's a story you probably never hear. My father was Army, and so we lived in segregated communities even before segregation became the law of the land. And so I had, you meant
integrated.
Yeah, integration, yes. And so we moved to Virginia, and in Virginia it was very segregated, and he drove us to the school that we were going to go to, and it was very noisy. You could hear the noise out in the parking lot. And he said, "I don't want you at this school." He said, "Let's see if there isn't a school." He looked at the map, found another school, drove us to it, and you could almost hear the discipline as you drove up to the school. And he went inside and asked if he could register us there. It turned out it was a Black school. And the principal said, "Your kids can't come here." And he begged to have us go there. And I think that's a story that you as a Black woman and other people who are Black should realize, that there are stories where you are the superior and the whites aren't.
I'm going to disagree, but I do understand the sentiment of what you're saying. And I think the sentiment of what you're saying is that in that particular situation, it was the Blacks who had the power to say no. But I want to offer that it wasn't coming from a place of superiority, probably more so from a place of fear.
Oh, she was saying that it was because your school was quiet, and the school that we were at first, which was the white school, was noisy. And most people would think, oh, those Blacks, you know, those Negroes, as they called them then, they're rowdy and all this stuff. And my father said, no.
No, he wanted us at that school.
Yes, he wanted you there.
We wanted to be there too.
And I honor him for that. He was before his time. He was a person before his time.
And I wonder too, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, go ahead, Bishop.
No, I also wonder, given the era that would have been in, if it would have been illegal to be integrated.
That's where I was getting to, Bishop. Thank you.
Yeah, I just thinking about that. I wonder if actually it
was Bishop Karen. The principal told our father that she would legally get in trouble.
Right. So So that's, I mean, as much as, you know, your dad wanted you there.
That's right.
You would have been vulnerable. The principal would have been vulnerable. The rest of the kids, it's very likely that would have been firebombed.
That's right.
So that it wasn't out of actually a place of power and privilege. It was out of a place of fear and oppression.
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to jump in here and say that we do need to move to our break. I want to thank Reverend Jackson for being with us so much. We're going to hear more from you tomorrow. But I think that was a good, and just ponder that last part of the conversation as we stand up and stretch and take care of whatever needs you have at this moment. We will return. I think we need our full break. We'll return at 7:44. I'll cut other things, not the break. Would you put the PowerPoint up, please, Belinda? Okay, so the conversation that we've been having even over break moves us right into our next segment, which is speaking truth to power. I hope you all had a nice break or a nice conversation. I hadn't anticipated people not taking the break. Learned something new every time, but it was great. Jeremiah the prophet, whose voice we heard in the opening statement, was actively called to speak truth into his context, speaking truth to power, although he struggled to embrace that identity at the beginning. He lived into it and did what he was called to do. Throughout her book, Dr. Morris speaks prophetically and points us towards justice. She speaks about harsh truth, lays out a comprehensible way to understand the factors that are pushing Black girls out of schools and into dire circumstances. So we're going to begin this section of our class by reviewing 4 important and impactful truths identified in the book. And now my notes went away. I got to get them back. So we'll go through these truths. We'll have people who are prepared to read these slides, and then we'll get instructions for our next breakout group. This is where we're going to get back on schedule.
Mary Huggins will read impactful truth number 1.
Or not. I think I'm going to fill in just to keep us moving. So
this unmuted. Now I got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay, good.
Okay, impactful truth number 1 is slavery. There is a legacy of slavery, a cultural legacy. Black folks are seen as being inferior because of this legacy. This notion has been enforced in Black codes, Jim Crow, and mandatory minimum sentences.
Mary Ann Tabor will read truth number 2.
Impactful truth number 2 is education. Education is important, and there is a legacy of Black women seeking education no matter the consequence.
Mary Huggins.
Yeah, impactful truth number 3, legislation. Legislation has impacted the way Black girls experience education. For example, measurement of success through standardized testing.
Black femininity. There are complicated and unfair standards for Black femininity. As Patricia Hill Collins wrote, all women engage in ideology that deems middle class, heterosexual, white femininity as normal. In this context, Black femininity as a subordinated gender identity becomes constructed, not just in relation to white women, but also in relation to multiple others, namely all men, sexual outlaws, prostitutes, lesbians, unmarried women, and girls.
Thank you. Belinda, could we have the next slide still?
Yes, coming up right now.
Okay. So we are going to go into our breakout rooms next. There will be 10 minutes for this breakout. Again, you can stay in the main section. The person whose name begins with the letter closest to A in the alphabet will be your leader. You will need a reporter for your group because we are going to come back and share what we discussed with the larger group. You will be assigned a statement from the sheet that you received by email, I believe last night. These are also in the book, but I think it'll be quicker to access it there. And then your assignment is to discuss which of the 4 impactful truths that we just heard do you most see reflected in your statement that you see impacting that area. And so we'll look at the statement. Again, remember the 4 truths, and then pick one to talk about. It may or may not be the one that's the title of your statement. So for instance, if your group is working on the liberative power of education, you might look through truths, decide that legislation affects it, and talk about how legislation has affected Black girls in their education. I'm hoping you're with me. Our team has had the hardest time with this particular task of all the tasks, but we're gonna get started. So the label you have for your breakout room, it will say your topic. So Black femininity, 1, 2, education, scholar, those are your assignments. So go ahead and send us to breakout rooms and we'll do the best we can.
That was quick.
All right, let's see. Britta, could we have the slide again? I know it was up for a second. So on the left hand of the column with the 4 areas, slavery, education, legislation, and Black femininity, our statement is on being a scholar. And I think I'll just go ahead and read it at this point. Historically, to be a scholar was a dangerous proposition for Black Americans, and countless Black women and men have died to be able to read and write. The lingering barriers to quality education and the transgenerational trauma associated with internalized ideas about performance in school have yet to be exhaustively measured. However, systemic denial of equal access to education has been documented and successfully challenged in the justice system, in the social sciences, and the court of public opinion. So which of these 4 areas are you most interested in talking about related to this statement? Okay, we're going to do a little poll. How many want to talk about how slavery impacted this? Raise your hand. How many want to talk about education with this statement? Raise your hand. Okay. How many want to talk? Okay, a couple. Good. How many want to talk about legislation? And how many want to talk about Black femininity? Okay, I think I'm not sure my screen had everybody in it because I had the small version of screen so I could see the PowerPoint. Someone who could see everybody, which one got the most votes?
I guess just to be clear, when you're talking about on being a scholar, we're looking at that that paragraph that's at the bottom, right?
Yes.
And so let me just share that one more time because I've had a hard time understanding this myself.
I know.
So this is kind of we're talking about the paragraph at the bottom, right. And because this has to do with being a scholar and sort of like, does education mean like what it might, the struggles of being a Black American, a Black woman trying to pursue education in spite of all of the cultural and all of the impediments, all the barriers?
All of the impediments. We can just, I think so. I saw several hands go up for that one. So let's just start with that one then. And I need to have it. So
I appreciated what Dr. Jackson was saying about how people would look at her and think, perhaps, well, what's the point? I mean, how far can you go in education because you're a Black girl, because you're a Black woman? These stereotypes, these expectations are so low.
Right. So that brought a little bit of okay, that statement alone, Belinda, I think brought up several of them. I mean, the legacy of slavery and people's perceptions as a part because of that history. Again, the legislation that provided challenges, the concept of Black femininity that I think also impacts that. So that's all of these, and education is of course what this is about. So education is actually impacted by each of the other truths as well. Any other thoughts? That was kind of my take on it.
I think that's true, but I also think that when integration occurred, we did not know how to educate the Black children. And of course, Black children in Texas anyway, and I think this was more than in Texas, the Black schools before integration were given the textbooks that the white schools had discarded. So they were old, out of date, torn up, and such.
Right. So
I also believe when we get to the legislation thing, I believe there has been much too much emphasis on testing. And I have worked in schools all of my working life.
Dr. Jackson, I don't know, you may have stepped away for a break, and that's totally understandable. I've never understood in this country of ours, the United States, 50 states, all territories, all the rest. I've never understood how we make schools work. For example, I don't understand how it can't be nationally organized that this many schools get this much money and there's an equity there. You know, I don't understand why we have it so that it depends upon if you live here or there in the tax base and what they decide they're going to spend. For example, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and just up the hill from me is Fairview High School, which is amazing. It's got all the gee whiz bells and whistles you can imagine because of the tax base, because of whatever. But you go to some other schools in this United States, and you've got what Evelyn was saying. You've got, maybe you don't have enough desks, or maybe your books are all ratty and falling apart, or, teachers are having to buy all these supplies because nothing's provided. I don't understand why if you really care about all the children in this country, I don't understand why we haven't been able to come up with a national plan to ensure that school districts have an opportunity just like another school district. I never really thought about it. I always wondered it, but in lieu of this discussion, it's really jumping it. It's really in the front of my brain.
Right. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
I think part of that is because each state has their own rules for education. Yes. And so each state does it differently. Each state puts more money into it or less.
And I think a lot of it comes down to that we want local control thing, which often means we want white control, because the white people have controlled residential areas. There was the whole redlining thing, and when people of color could only buy houses in certain areas, they were excluded from other areas. And at least my experience is folks in well-to-do communities want local control of their own school district so they can fund the whistles and bells. And they don't necessarily want to share their resources with those kids down the way that don't have that funding. So they're all intertwined. All of these issues really connect.
The state of Colorado does have a minimum that should be spent on each child. And if the school's financial base can't provide that, then the state does bring it up to that level. Now, that means that school that you're in probably gets no state funding because it is currently raising more funds than the state minimum.
So again, if we think back to the conversation just before the break about, again, the legislative aspects and the legal, the Jim Crow and the legal separation of Black schools and white schools. And I think that's a piece of what Evelyn had started talking about too, about how, the old worn out textbooks that the white schools didn't want anymore, they gave to the Black kids. It's good enough for them. It's all just so interconnected. I think we're beginning to come back from the breakouts.
Would you like to have the conversation or go straight to the dance break?
Let's see. Give me a second to actually think. How about I invite anybody who wants to share something for their group to put it in the chat so we can see it that way. And let's go ahead and go to the dance break. I really want to save a good amount of time for our next activity, which is working with the stories of different girls. So I hope you all had good conversations. Let us know in the chat, and let's get up and move a minute.
Oh, sorry, I have to, the slides screen that you sent me, Pastor Melanie, doesn't have the music
link on it?
working. Doesn't have the music working, so I have to go to the other one.
Okay, yeah, they never worked, the ones that you sent me, so that will probably keep happening.
That's fine. Yeah, so that's okay. We'll make it work. And we're about to go to dance break, so feel free to get up and move around and have some fun with it.
My God, 8 hours for what? Oh, tell me what I got. I've gotten this feeling that time's just holding me down. I'll hit the ceiling, or else I'll tear up this town. Tonight I gotta cut loose, foot loose. Kick off your Sunday shoes, please, Louise. Pull me off of my knees, Jack. Get back, come on before we crack. Lose your blues, everybody cut foot loose. Cut foot loose, cut foot loose, cut foot loose. Put your feet on the ground. Now take a hold of your soul. I'm turning it loose. Whoa, got your Sunday shoes. Oh, yeah. Please, Louise, pull me off of my knees. Yeah, get back. Come on before we can start. Lose your blues. Everybody cut, everybody cut. Everybody cut, everybody cut. Everybody cut, everybody cut. Everybody got foot loose. Yeah.
Woo! Well, that was fun. Are we good for one, or do you want to do two?
No, I think we should do the other one too.
All right, let's do it. It's not quite as fast paced, but that's okay. Let me make sure I've got this going the right way. Yes, I do. Oh, that was fun dancing with y'all. Whoop, back. Here we go.
Just listen. The song says everything.
Oh no, sometimes in our lives we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Just lean on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. That's not the problem, and you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me. If there is a load, there's road. I'll share your load if you just call me. Call me. Call me. When you need a friend. Call me. Call me. When you need a friend. Yeah. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on, lean on, lean on me. Lean on me. You can lean on me. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Somebody to lean on.
All right. I hope you all had a good break. Our next section of class, we're going to be focusing on how everything we've been talking about shows up and impacts the experiences of individual girls. So to get us to move into this topic, we're going to meet a girl on video. Oh, and thank you for those of you who've put your notes in the chat. I really appreciate your sharing and you taking time to do that. So I think we're going to see, we'll see a clip from the mini documentary on PUSHOUT. We'll get to meet Jazzy.
Naya Kinney, 18 years old, speaking out after defending her classmate being taken into custody in her Spring Valley High School math class. I love science ever since I was a little girl. 16-year-old Central Florida honor roll student accused of igniting a chemical explosion on school grounds, leading to her arrest and suspension. You see Black girls be natural-born earthquakes. You see Black girls be the smoke and the boom. Black girls like their bass loud for the smoke and the boom.
Every time you suspend a child out of school, that child's risk of ending up in juvenile hall goes up. One suspension. All it takes is one.
Black girls in particular are situated in communities where there is a misrepresentation and misunderstanding of their expressions of femininity. There are lots of ways in which their behaviors are misread as loud and sassy and aggressive when in fact they're just manifestations of their critical thinking.
Black girls don't get the benefit of the doubt. They don't get the leeway to be children, right? They're treated as little women, right? And so when they behave in ways that the school finds inappropriate, the censure is immediate and harsh.
And we capture so many girls who are experiencing extreme victimization as truant. And that's sort of where we stop the conversation.
I'm here to give testimony as a person who was in the education system and was pushed out into the criminal justice system. She nodded to the guy with the badge on, and he handcuffed me. He got me in a car. He said, "You know why you going to jail? Because you've been ditching school." The connection that I was looking for was just someone to like kind of understand what I was going through, not to just label me as a delinquent because I didn't want to go to school. Young girls, and especially me, when I was young, I needed someone to be there for me, to walk me through. You can't just come in and then have a curriculum and then expect for them to understand your curriculum when at home they're witnessing their mom or their parent being beat. They need help with that.
You'll see that the girls who are most at risk of school pushout are also girls who have extensive victimization histories. There were fewer than 10 girls in the facility that day, and all of them had been assembled into a small group for a book discussion I'd come to facilitate. About halfway through the discussion.
All right. So it's all a lovely piece. That was a little longer than I had planned. on showing, but it's such a great clip. That will be in our resources. You can look it up and see the whole video at your leisure. So this part of our evening is called Say Her Name. Say her name is a phrase we began to hear referring to the Black men and women who were killed by law enforcement officers. Say their name to honor their individuality and their humanity. This section of our class focuses on the experiences of individual girls. And the girls are the most important part about this class. The concepts are to help us understand the experiences of the girl. So we will be going back into breakout rooms again. Once again, we'll have the main group open for those who care to be here. You'll focus on one particular girl. The name of your group will be the girl who you'll focus on. So if your screen comes up and says Destiny 2, Destiny is the girl you're going to be reading about. Take a few minutes to look and refresh your memory about Destiny's story. That's why we hoped you would have the handouts available on your screen or printed out, or you can find it in the book as well. And then pay attention to the age of your girl and what difference that makes. And then look at these questions. So we'll have 15 minutes, a little bit longer for this. The leader's the youngest person in the group this time. You'll need a reporter. Again, read the information about your girl and ask the questions about her. It is likely that we will not have time to talk about every single girl before the end of the class. So what we want you to do is to take notes about your discussion. And if you do not get to report about your girl, please send those notes to Catherine. We'll have her email up a little bit later so that we can all learn a little bit about what you discovered on your girl. So our questions are, who are the people in the story? And okay, they just went away. What systems and institutions impact this girl? How does the girl describe her experiences? And what principles have we discussed tonight that impact her and how? So 15 minutes in your groups, and then we will come back together to hear about various girls.